The great Erick Simpson fills in for a vacationing Rich Freeman this week, and it's a good thing too, because there's a lot to dig into, like firing some customers this quarter, the impossible dream of cybersecurity, gaming PCs as rendering engines, and favorite Halloween movies, and more. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 245, melted in a weird shape. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 245. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you. And if you've listened before, you know who you are. You're the VARs, you're the IT integrators, you're the IT consultants, you're the managed services providers. You might be that one guy that works at the zoo who just really likes listening to podcasts about channel resellers. And kudos to you for having such a wide and varied interest in your chosen career path. But if you're any of those things, if you work with technology with other companies and with other businesses, you are in the right place. And if you are a returning listener or viewer, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of our family of audience that tunes in each and every week to the ChannelPro Weekly podcast. Great to have you. At this point of the show, this is normally where I say, what the heck sound was that? We'll get to that in just a second. But this is where I normally say, joining me each and every week. It's like a jet engine landed, or what was that?
It was supposed to be applause, Matt. It was supposed to be applause. Let's try it again. Appreciating everyone tuning in. That's what it's all about today.
You know, it's funny, through my earpiece, it sounded honestly like a toilet flushing or like a jet engine landing. So it wasn't.
No, that was last week, actually. So no travel this week.
No travel this week. So who is that man? Well, that man is our co-host for today. Super excited to have him with us. You've seen his face before. In fact, if you tune into the 5-minute roundup with Rich Freeman every week, you'll see his delightful mug there as they kind of do a quick breakdown of the news stories of the week and a little bit of fun there. But he built and sold one of the first pure play MSPs in the industry. He's a technology business and channel growth expert, influencer, thought leader, speaker, and author with 4-time best-selling books and 50 white papers to his credit. He is also just one heck of a guy. Please welcome the great, the awesome, the amazing, the man who needs no introduction. So this was really all a big waste of time, Erick Simpson. Welcome, Erick.
Now you're trying to make me blush. It's not going to work though. We definitely got to work on that intro. It's way too long and too wordy. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and let's share with everybody why it's just you and me on the show today, kind of leading the conversation. One of the folks that is expected to be on this program is missing. Where is he?
He is gone. That's right. Mr. Freeman has so for a man who travels a ton for work and like lives out of hotels and goes to all the events, what does he do when he goes on vacation? He packs his bags and gets on a plane and travels, right? Which is just bizarre to me, I guess. But Mr. Freeman is he's on vacation. He is gallivanting about the globe. I don't want to ruin where he's gone or what he's up to, because we'll ask him about that when he gets back on the show in a couple weeks. But it's just us. He is left the building and left me and Erick to play in the sandbox by ourselves and
fill some shoes. Yeah. He's on vacation. He's disconnected, and enjoy it. Well deserved, well earned. But that leaves the heavy lifting to us, Matt. Just you and me. So I know, before we went live, you were kind of concerned. You're like, man, I don't know. I want to do a great show, and do Rich proud. And I'm like, it'll be fine. Let's have a conversation. It's not awkward, right? You do this all the time. You do this every week. I do this every week too on the 5-minute roundup. So why feel trepidatious about having a conversation with our viewers and listeners? Let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Let's do it. Let's have some fun. Let's break down some cool stories that we have. Let's have a little fun. This is the pseudo Halloween episode is what I'm going to call it, because we are kind of close to the Halloween holiday. So for our listening audience, I decided to dress up for this particular episode. I have the most crazy costume on right now. It's too bad that you can't see it. For a viewing audience, we don't necessarily always get a ton of viewers, so sorry I didn't dress up here on YouTube in a costume, but maybe next year I could do that. So appreciate that as well, and hopefully that'll be fun. But we're going to have a little bit of Halloween fun this particular episode. We'll get to that later on in the show. But we've got Erick, we've got a lot of stuff we're going to talk about. We got a blog post that we're going to talk about with a great. I don't even want to spoil the topic. It's always a fun topic to talk about. We're going to be talking about the impossible dream of cybersecurity, which is a column by Josh Liberman that hit the site. We're going to be talking about gaming PCs as rendering engines. We're going to be talking about mostly one, but two Dynabook notebooks that we reviewed and that hit the site in recent times that I think is worthy of discussion. We don't actually have any news, though. You know, when your news guy is gone, it's kind of hard to get a lot of news, but also it's actually just been a pretty slow news week in general this week for some reason. So I guess always going into holidays, it's always that a little bit slow, but we've got that.
Sometimes taking a break from news is kind of refreshing too, though, I'll say, so, we'll cover these great stories. We'll have a little fun. And I know, Matt, I mean, your costume is just beyond the pale. So if you're listening and not watching the podcast, you're really missing out. I, however, have completely dressed down. So I went anti-Halloween. So I think if you've seen me on other podcasts or on the 5-minute roundup, I'm usually, dressed a little bit more professional. Today, I kind of dressed down a little bit. So again, if you're listening to the podcast and want to see what crazy getup Matt's got on and what I don't have on, then, check out ChannelPro YouTube channel for this particular podcast.
And my apologies in advance to our audio listeners that go and actually try to go see my crazy costume. My apologies. But Erick, you missed a perfect opportunity, though, because anytime you're wearing a hoodie like that, you could just be like, I'm a hacker. You're dressed up as a hacker for Halloween. I think it works. So go and see Erick's costume.
A white hat hacker. There you go.
That's right, because it's a beautiful white hoodie, white hat hacker. Awesome stuff. So, Erick, let's just go ahead and...
How about this, Mac? Do you know what this is?
Let's see. I see. Hold on. Let me put it up on the screen here. I see the Vulcan symbol. I see a fist. I see. It's rock. Is it rock, paper, scissors?
Lizard Spock. It's
from rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. I didn't know what the hand gestures were for lizard and Spock. Okay, yeah. I got it.
Those came after.
Yeah, a good reference to what's the show? Hold on, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Got a guy named Sheldon in it.
Big Bang Theory. Yeah.
There you go.
I knew what it was. I've seen them all. We watched all of those, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Good show. Yeah. So anyway, well, why don't we just go ahead and dive in? We've got a lot to talk about. And the first thing that we're gonna lead with is by saying, Erick, how are you?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. I mean, what's the point, right? But nothing out of the usual to report here. Looking forward to getting back into more of the regular kind of event schedule, opportunities that we now start seeing ourselves in. I think 2023, we're going to see a lot more of the type of events that Channel Pros have been missing for the last few years because of, the pandemic and the lockdown now. And looking forward to participating in more Channel Pro live events next year as well.
And there's going to be a lot of those, and we'll learn about those a little bit later on in the show. But I mean, you are my co-host at Arms here this week, but you're also still a guest host as well. So for those who may have not caught an episode that you're on, or haven't tuned into the 5-minute roundup yet with you and Rich Freeman, which absolutely they should do. Tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about what you do.
So my background is in enterprise IT. So many, many years ago, in another lifetime, I used to build out call centers and service desks for Fortune 1000 organizations, train and hire and train staff, integrate systems and platforms, and then turn them over to clients. Around 1997, I decided I want to do something different. I started my own IT practice. Around about 2004-ish, we became one of the first MSPs in the channel, and we didn't call it managed services back then, Rich. It was just flat fee IT services. And then later on, we figured out, oh, this is managed services. Sold that practice a few years later, co-founded MSP University. And this is where we trained Channel Pros on everything all the mistakes that we had made becoming MSPs and how we overcame those and help them transition, into this new managed IT services model. So we built a channel of about 30,000 channel partners doing that. Did a bunch of road shows and boot camps for the next 8 or 9 years. Today, I work with IT providers, MSPs, CSPs, MSSPs, and help them improving their business practices. And I work with channel vendors and distributors, helping with channel program strategy, channel recruitment, and channel sales enablement for their internal teams, as well as their channel partners. So just enjoying every bit of that. I'll share a secret with you, Matt. I used to be that, I'm using air quotes now, people hating engineer back in the enterprise. You know what I'm talking about? The person that, was all about process and checklists and KPIs and things like that. And if you wanted to talk to me, boy, you better email me, because I didn't want to talk to you. And over the years, I've completely flipped. Now, the part that I enjoy most is the people and the channel and the community and all that. And I really, really enjoy working with entrepreneurs, and I'm a lot less, the anti-people person, and a lot more like appreciating and enjoying people. And that's something that, kind of surprised me, because I was completely different years and years ago. But I think you adapt, yourself, and you try to better yourself based upon, what you foresee your role being, and trying to fulfill your role and trying to grow personally and professionally. And I think, that's been a journey that I've been on, try to improve myself and really enjoy things and enjoy experiences and people, and try not to, be that tremendous workaholic that I used to be back in the day.
Well, sometimes being a tremendous workaholic breeds success, and there's no argument with the outcome of that in your particular circumstance. But I want to ask you a little bit about back in the day, the good old times when IT support in business was not what it is today. It was nowhere near as organized. It was very chaotic. It was not managed by any sense of the word. It really was the wild, wild west. And there was a few pioneers like you, Carl Palachuk. And so, like, did you all know about each other back in the day, or were you reading each other's blogs, or like what was the relationship like back then with some of these pioneers in the industry like yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, Carl Palachuk, Amy Luby, myself, I think we were at that kind of the tip of the spear, right? The very beginning of that movement, and being recognized in the channel for that. And yes, you find each other doing these things. Back then, as you can imagine, yeah, IT support was a lot different, but so was kind of the channel and the community as well, right? There were much fewer events. So the events that were being put on, Harry Brailsford was a great pioneer putting on some of his events early on. We would end up at these events, and that's how we got to know each other. And Carl and Amy are some of my oldest friends in the channel. I mean, we're talking on the regular all the time. And, so we did find each other then, and we did compare notes, and we did things each a little bit differently, right? So we each appealed to a different segment of the channel and channel partners at that time. But, and we did events together too. And boy, when we got, together at different events, that was really a lot of fun, because, it created great conversation, and it allowed us to, to pick up tips and techniques from each other, just like channel partners and channel pros go to events now to kind of learn from peers and things like that. I mean, if we're not learning something in every interaction, then, we're doing ourselves kind of a disservice. And I read a book years ago, Matt, that said, because now I do a lot of coaching and consulting primarily. And the book was about, consulting. And the author said that if you're not learning something from every consulting engagement, not only are you doing yourself a disservice, but you're doing your clients a disservice, because that really means that you're just kind of, phoning it in, almost just doing the playbook, rinse and repeat. So to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, to learn more things that you can then bring to other clients moving forward. And that's why I really enjoy getting, introduced to different unique circumstances, different business models that, my clients want me to help them with and things like that. So yeah, but back in the day, back in those early days, it was kind of nobody told us we couldn't do something or we shouldn't be doing what we were doing. So we just kind of went at it a million miles an hour and, found like-minded individuals that we like to surround ourselves with back then, just like we do now. And that was kind of how this whole thing started, kind of snowballing downhill, and it gained a lot of momentum. And who knew? We thought we were just doing, something to grow our own businesses, and then found that there was an appeal for it, and other folks wanted to know how we were doing what we were doing. And I'm talking collectively about me, Carl, and Amy, and there were others, back in the early days. But we were, I think, probably more visible because we were actually promoting these types of services and speaking at lots of different events and marketing ourselves that way.
Do you think that if had let's say you and Carl and Amy been a lot more quiet about your business practices, that core group of people who were kind of rolling managed services, that managed services model that is very, very prevalent today, do you think that eventually that is the model that would have emerged, maybe not from that core group of folks back in the day, but eventually kind of emerged because it makes a little bit more sense? Or do you think that the industry could have gone a completely different way when it comes to the way the channel operates?
No, I mean, I think that we would have ended up, pretty close to where we are now. It might have taken longer, right? I think that what we were able to do is kind of like focus attention and conversation and kind of be the catalyst to really kick things off. I mean, not for nothing, we were being, flown out and interviewed by big vendors and distributors back in the day to talk about managed services and how to, integrate that into what they were doing and how to reach the partners that were interested in becoming MSPs and things like that. And, if I like to think about it as, in this way, I like to think that we were able to maybe focus the conversation, maybe guide the conversation a little bit, and maybe champion the needs of partners in the channel and help accelerate more MSP friendly type of channel programs, more MSP friendly pricing. I mean, back in the day when we were doing this, Matt, I mean, there was no consumption-based licensing model for MSPs. If we wanted to buy licenses for an RMM tool, we had to buy a ton of licenses to get a price and then worry about, all right, how do we make our money back? We better start selling these to all these, clients. And it was like that with a lot of services. Today, holy cow, I mean, we can go out and we can, purchase licensing and other services by the drink as we need them. So the pricing models by the channel vendors and distributors became much more MSP friendly, supporting MSPs, which I think that was probably, in addition to what we were doing to try to promote the message and train MSPs to emulate the model that we were doing. I think that was as big of a catalyst as anything to accelerate, the opportunity that we see today for managed service providers. So it had to be a combination of partners and their strategic vendor partners getting together to evolve and accelerate the outcome. You're on mute, Matt.
You mentioned licenses, and you wanted to, and I want you to speak a little bit to the way the tools were built back then, because I think what a lot of people may not, especially those who are maybe newer to the channel, recently started their own business, work for an MSP right now, the tool sets that exist today are kind of custom tailored and built with channel resellers in mind. But back in the day, that really wasn't the case. You either had enterprise stack level tools, which were not white, they weren't white boxed or white label or whatever. Or you had basically like consumer tools. How did you fend back then and decide what to use? How did you get through all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't remember there being a lot of consumer tools that were even out back then that kind of did the things that were anything close to what we do now. I'm sure there were a few, but not that I knew of. When I came from the enterprise, we were used to, having the, tools that, MSPs or IT pros could not afford, right, with their own practices. I mean, these were costly tools, Tivoli, some IBM or HP OpenView, IBM Tivoli, things like that. These were like $100,000 tools that we were using to manage what we needed to do in the enterprise. And obviously those costs were prohibitive for, a small IT shop. And so when I launched my practice, I ended up coding our own ticketing system from an Access database, later kind of a SQL thing, and evolved it. But it was very rudimentary, just to try to emulate some of the tools that we had in the enterprise. And then later we started to see, PSA tools come along like ConnectWise, and then we started to see RMM tools. I think we subscribed to ConnectWise initially, and Arnie Bellini was our sales professional. That's how far back we go with Arnie and in the channel and the history. So he actually sold us ConnectWise and was our kind of lead on getting us onboarded and implemented. We signed up with Level Platforms for an RMM tool, and then later switched to Zenith Infotech, which was offering outsourced NOC services early on. This was right at the very beginning when all this stuff happened. But, we had to make do with what we had initially. And then when these early products came on, like the PSA solution, there was really no cloud back then, right? I don't think there was even internet back then. I think we were dealing with NT3.x, right? Maybe NT4. So we really didn't have cloud capabilities to support our products. So these were like on-prem, like we had to build servers to host our PSA solution, to host our RMM management platforms and things like that, and the other tools that we had, and then create connectivity and things like that to our client location. So it was very, very early on, very kind of build the tools that you need to support your clients. And today it's completely different. I mean, wow, we can light up an infrastructure in the cloud with a few mouse clicks. We can deploy things remotely. We can support clients remotely. A great story. We were supporting clients remotely through dial-up modems, right? And PC Anywhere. That's how we were supporting clients remotely. And 56K was as fast as we could do it on those modems.
And honestly, Eric, to this day, we don't need anything faster than 56K. They really did hit the end milestone of speed with that one. No one would ever need any more than that. Just like 640K of RAM. That was who would need more than that?
Who would need more than that? Right? We're just gluttons. We're just gluttons, We just want more, and we want it now. We want it before now. We want it yesterday.
Yesterday, for sure. It's funny, you're talking about a lot of the tools and how you kind of were coding some of your own solutions. I think a lot of the early tools, kind of that ended up becoming targeted tools for the channel were actually created by those who were servicing customers in the channel. And then they kind of switched to the vendor side of they realized, wow, I built something that's really valuable that I just needed something to do this. And then they evolved that in some of the companies that I would say exist today. Maybe some of them do, but certainly companies that bought companies that bought companies that bought companies that bought them at some point. So that's kind of interesting. So I'll ask you one more question on this, and then we're going to move on to this blog entry that you have that I really want to get to. And that's if you were to think back to maybe one conversation that you had with some of the early awesome pioneers like Carl and Amy, what was something that you all disagreed with, or any just interesting discussion you had that led to a disagreement of sorts?
Well, I would just say a difference of opinion, right? It wasn't kind of a disagreement. It was more, I think the liveliest conversations we always had, at least, when I was part of the conversation, was all around how to price, right? And I think that conversation lives on today, Matt, because that's a big component of what I do with partners today, is helping them bundle and price services for what today's buyers are investing in to meet their cybersecurity needs and all those kinds of things. But there was a lot of conversation about pricing and how to price. Should you have, your set portfolio of services and that's the only thing you sell, and here's how you should price it and have these requirements. And we all had differences of opinions there, I think, a little bit. But other than that, I think everything was more around, you know, how to solve process issues, how to solve sales challenges, how to deal with, you know, troublesome customers. Those challenges are the same challenges we all have today. It's just today we're dealing with a different tool set, a different mindset. We have a lot more support from our vendors. I mean, that's the other thing that I think the next evolution, I talked about, you know, MSP friendly programs and pricing from vendors. I think the next evolution that we're seeing now is now these vendors are really investing in that partner enablement component, right? We're really training them on how to grow their businesses, business improvement, how to sell better, how to market better, lots more training and things like that. And that's kind of where I think, you know, my brand was built, is really delivering that business sense, business optimization, business performance improvement philosophy, that thought leadership. And now we're seeing a lot of the vendors really making big investments there. And I think that is another, just, you know, now we're in fifth gear, you know, helping the channel as a team, right? And the vendors seeing the relationship between their partners in a much more strategic fashion and investing in it that way. So I think that's a big help as well.
Very, very interesting. Well, cool discussion. I always love learning a little bit more about some of the stuff that happened in the times long ago, in the before times when technology was and IT was just a different thing back then, and it's really cool to have someone on like you who was there and actually was a very, very influential into the direction of how all of that went, and how many in the IT industry and the IT channel are servicing customers today. So it's really, really fascinating to have you on. Thank you for that discussion. But one other discussion that we can have is on this blog entry you wrote, and this is always a contentious discussion with fellow IT providers and business owners, and you get radically different answers and radically different opinions and whether or not that's something you should do. But we're going into the fourth quarter, Erick, and you are saying fourth quarter's here. It's time to do something. Erick, what is it time to do?
It's time to fire some customers, Matt. Just drop the mic right there. I'm out.
Boom. Drops the mic. He's gone. So Erick, why should we just fire some customers because it's the end of the year? Is that like their Christmas present or what?
It's certainly not a Christmas present for anyone. And, you know, I wanted to make a bold statement, and the premise behind that blog post is, you know, it's Q4, and this is typically the time, Matt, when, you know, and I'm going to use I'm going to include myself in that conversation as a recovering MSP, right? I no longer own an MSP practice, so, you know, just being clear about that. But now's the time when we typically look to the new year, right? And in 2023, what is our strategy for growth? And one way or one factor that prevents our growth is not having the right mix of clients in our client base. And so when I say, look, it's time to fire some customers, I'm talking about going through an exercise and determining what makes a great client for, you know, a ChannelPro or an MSP. What are those qualities? And then applying that evaluation against every single client in your client base. And what we tend to find, Matt, is we'll segment them into kind of our best clients and maybe our second best and maybe, you know, our third best clients, just based upon criteria, whatever that criteria is. And it can include factors such as, you know, they're strategic. They see you as a strategic value to their organization. They have budget. They do what you recommend that they should do, right? They're growing, right? You don't have a lot of customer service challenges with them, right? It's just a great relationship. And there's some other factors that, you know, any IT pro would kind of pepper in there to kind of evaluate the suitability of that client remaining a client. They're agreeing to subscribe to our minimum cybersecurity requirements with no fuss, right? Not putting us at risk, those types of things. And so, this is kind of that A, B, C kind of client segmentation. A clients, B clients, maybe C customers. Maybe they're more transactional. Maybe there's some other issues with them. Maybe they're not profitable. When I work with partners, Matt, one of the first things I ask when we go through their client list is, hey, let's do this exercise. And then I starting with the C's, would you be more profitable if they weren't a client of yours? And that's a weird question to ask because people don't normally think that way. And I say, well, how noisy are they, right? Do they give you a lot of customer service challenges? Are they constantly arguing about your invoicing? Are they slow paying you? Are they not subscribing to your enhanced cybersecurity services? Are they putting you at risk? Things like that. And when we do an analysis and assessment from a profitability perspective, it becomes pretty clear what customers are the least profitable, not simply from a revenue perspective, but from a growth perspective, from a relationship perspective. And my argument is simply, look, if it's costing you more money to support a customer, then you've got to take a hard look at why you should maintain that relationship. The second thing we should look at is to understand the reality that says, for every C customer that you continue to support, they're taking the spot of a potential A or B client, right? So, and in some cases, you might be able to replace a C customer with 2 A clients that aren't noisy, that are more strategic, that have budget, that will do what you recommend, that will lessen your risk because they're enhancing their cybersecurity and they're allowing you to deliver those services, right? And those types of things. So look at this from the perspective of being a coach of a professional sports team, right? We're looking, our season's over, right? We want to get to the championship next year and we need to make some player trades, right? Just as simple as that. I mean, this happens with every professional sports team, right? There's trades that are made so that they can get the team that they need to get them to the championship next year. Now, in my analogy, the players are your clients, right? So we may need to do some trading to make room for better players on our team that can take us to the championship of, profitability, higher efficiency. The less you have to work on noisy, potentially troublesome customers, the more time you have to invest strategically on the A and B clients and add more value and bill them for that time. So when I say, look, it's time to fire some customers, I'm talking about this evaluation and analysis of who's in your client list and who you would prioritize in replacing with new A or B clients to make room for them. And then having that conversation with them. And why I say it's Q4, you want to have that conversation before it's renewal time, right? To hit the ground running in Q1 and create that opportunity to bring on more clients and relieve yourself of some of those customer service challenges. I remember, Matt, when I had my MSP, and the first time I did this was, I was concerned. I was worried about losing the revenue that these C customers represented. But you know what I found out? 2 really important things I'll share here. One, we actually were more profitable after we exited those customers for many of the reasons I just mentioned, including them, complaining about invoice costs and stuff and us writing stuff off. And 2, with those C customers going away, a lot of our customer satisfaction problems went away with them, right? So that improved our staff's morale. So these things I didn't expect. We are more profitable, right? We reduced our customer satisfaction issues and having to deal with that extra overhead. And then our staff's morale got really high because they knew that once we did that, we were going to continue doing it and we would stop working with these C customers that were challenging for them. And so, those are 3 benefits that we enjoyed. And after that first round of difficult conversations, with customers. We obviously help them, find new homes and help them with that transition. But this was a yearly thing that we did every single year to try to, create more A and B clients. And after a while, our pyramid of A, B, and C, A clients, B clients, and C customers looked more like A and B clients. And now we were just trying to get more of those B clients into that A category, because we would not accept any more C customers when we went out and did our sales qualifying and things like that. We had our criteria. If they looked like a C customer, then they just simply weren't a fit for our organization as we continue to mature and become more strategic.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff in this blog post, and I want to highlight a couple things you said. One, where I've always heard the opposite end of this argument is usually from MSPs that are smaller, still starting out, where revenue really is a big deal, and they're just taking every penny they can get. And I have to imagine that this is one of these exercises that is really important to do, but it's also, you touch on the point of doing it yearly, because I have to imagine that if you're going to start trying to shed C clients that end up costing you more or make things difficult or add stress to your life, getting rid of 9 of them at once is probably not a sound business decision, right? So if you do this every year, you're never having to shed a ton of stuff at once, and you can be like, oh, well, I have this many A, B, and I can get rid of 1, and it's not really going to be that impactful. But what would you say to folks who are a little bit smaller, who really, really are kind of penny pinching? Is it still something that you want to do? Like, you don't obviously want to put somebody out of business if they lose the revenue, but where's the line? How would you address that, Erick?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. So everybody starts off at that point, right? We all were a startup at some point. And Matt, there's nothing wrong with taking on business so that you can keep the lights on and pay the bills, right? And so this strategy, typically becomes more attractive as an organization grows and becomes a little bit more mature. So, obviously there's a point in time when, just firing your C, maybe all you have are C customers, right? We've had that experience too, me and my team. So I get it. And you're right. After, that first time, maybe you're getting rid of like the noisiest of the noisy, right? Maybe there's even in that C customer list, you kind of segment that and go, okay, and it's typically no surprise at who everyone feels we should stop doing business with, right? I mean, there's always that one client. It's like, boy, if we could wave a wand, that would be the one client we would want to stop doing business with right away. So pick one and think about the timing of that, right? So I'm saying, look, you're going out there and you're selling and you're marketing. If you're not doing a good job at bringing on new business, then sometimes exiting a bad client, takes a little bit more thought and nerve, right, to do so. But there are some times when you have no choice to get rid of a bad client, right? I mean, I remember firing clients because they were just rude or cussed out one of our techs or did something that was just crossed the line. And that was one phone call for me. Hey, you will not be treating our staff like that anymore. And in fact, Friday is going to be the last day we provide service to you. So I'll, be expecting a letter from us, but we don't brook that kind of nonsense, that kind of stuff, right? So hopefully that's an outlier, right? But from a strategic perspective, yes, maybe you get rid of one noisy client and bring on a better client, right? And maybe it's 2, but if you do this kind of regularly, hopefully you'll get to a point at some point where you're not firing many customers, right? And that's the point here, is when you get to a place in your business growth where you now get to pick and choose the clients that you want to work with, that is a happy day, right? That is a happy day. And that's the day when a strategy like this starts making more sense, right? When you are like, okay, we're not taking any more, customers that look like this. We're shooting for these folks now. And that's when you can start evaluating those other customers in that, lower category and saying, okay, would I be more profitable, relieve the stress of my team, et cetera, whatever those considerations are if we exited this particular customer, and when is the right time to do it is simply up to you. But my encouragement is at least put a strategy in place and begin assessing this so that when the opportunity does strike, when you say, hey, I'd like to take on and onboard this new client, but I can't because you know how tough it is right now, Matt. It's no secret. It's tough to find great technical help right now. We're battling, our technicians and engineers getting poached by our competitors and the enterprise and things like that. So it's even more important now to look at how we can scale our services more profitably when it's not as easy to hire more technicians to support new clients in the current environment, right? So it's kind of a broad conversation. And like I said, I don't recommend anyone, pulling the trigger, cart before the horse and just hoping that you can go sell somebody else. But, partners will know when the time is right. Like when you're at a point when you say, look, I can't support the customers I have, I can't bring on new customers, and I can't hire anybody. Well, something's got to give. Sometimes firing, a poor customer and bringing on a better customer is easier than growing your technical staff to support more customers while still supporting these poor performing customers.
Yeah, and that's where the sports team coach analogy I think really starts to fit in, is because it can always be a very contentious decision on what is better. Well, what's great is that you get to decide as a business owner what matters to you and your customers, right? Like if you imagine how sports trades go, like everybody sees things a little bit differently. Like a sports organization might actually, you say you want to shed the customers that are more difficult, that are not as good, and get better customers. Well, sometimes sports teams will shed their best quarterback or their best whatever and replace them with three players that may not be as good in someone else's eyes, but those players might be filling certain gaps, or that other star player might have been a royal pain in the butt and toxic to the team, or was in the news and was causing a bad image or whatever. Like there can be all kinds of reasons, but that's why it is really interesting. And I want you to talk for a second about the different criteria that you can use to evaluate these customers, and kind of explain how that is, there's no right answer to whatever is best, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and ultimately that, there are some basic criteria that everyone could kind of agree on. Is like, look, I think the most important one, after you get past the importance of the revenue that a customer represents, is probably cultural fit, right? Are they a cultural fit for your company? And that's probably one of the toughest things, to address, because when you're building, you mentioned earlier, hey, what if we're smaller, we're starting out? Yeah, we're taking on as many customers as we can to keep the lights on. And we may even be taking on customers that may not be a great cultural fit, but we don't know that yet, right? You discover over, that first year, maybe that first quarter, 2 quarters, you kind of get a sense for who that business owner is and, how they perceive the relationship, and do they align with your own, personal viewpoints or attributes or whatever you want to call it, right? Do they align with that? And those clients, it's kind of like hiring a great engineer, super like accomplished, professional, and they've saved the company time and again out of scrapes. But man, they're just difficult to deal with. I mean, nobody on the team likes them. They just don't feel like they're a good fit. And we feel like, oh my goodness, we can't let that engineer go because, we're afraid of, losing that ability or that capability or whatever. And ultimately, in every single scenario that I've been involved in, Matt, where there's been this kind of situation where we've got this, person that is just brilliant, but is just not a team player, right? Doesn't get along with anybody, ticks off customers, right? Potentially. They end up either being exited or leaving, right, somewhere else, and everyone is relieved. And we never want that day to come because we fear the absence of that person. But afterwards, when we analyze it, we're like, wow, we should have let that person go a long time ago, because look at how quiet things are. Look at that team chemistry that we've regained. Look at that focus that we have now. Same thing with these C customers. If there's not a good fit like that, the moment that we exit them or they, move on, we have that palpable sense of, wow, man, we're glad that happened. It may sting a little bit right now, but look at all the other benefits. And that kind of, again, re-energizes the team to say, look, we're not going to be taking on any more customers like that. Just so you folks know, we're going to be going through our client list, and we're going to take care of the folks that we feel aren't a fit for us from either a cultural perspective, from a revenue generation perspective, a budget. Are they growing? Are they not growing? Now, if they're not growing, but they're not a big problem, I wouldn't say that those would be folks that I would put on the, we need to exit them list. But certainly, if the sports team analogy, right? If the player is just mediocre, hey, they're not making any touchdowns, but, they're not getting sacked either, but they're really not performing as well as another player. Like, look at that player on that team. We could make a trade for them and look at their performance. It's that kind of thing, right? So again, just get rid of the pain first, the pain of lack of profitability. And I'm talking about significant profitability, right? We want to shoot for, on our managed service agreements, on the labor services, we want 60% margin, right? We want that, as far as we can get it. And if we've got customers that are generating 15 or 20% profit margin, that's a consideration too. So cultural fit, revenue generation, strategic value. Like, we make some consideration on, holy cow, they are a brand that people recognize, right? We will keep them because we can promote that. And maybe there's some potential benefit to us that isn't directly related to revenue or things like that. I can see some of that, but those are typically outliers, Matt. So really, is it a fit for the organization based upon, cultural fit, strategic value? Do they see you as an organization that is more a strategic partner rather than just a vendor that they can tail wag the dog, right, and not take your advice? Do they put the company at risk? And by putting the company at risk, putting the rest of your clients at risk from a cybersecurity perspective? So let's say if you have 99% of your clients, Matt, that agree to sign up for your enhanced cybersecurity package. And that means that, you're doing everything to mitigate their risk, to enhance their cybersecurity posture. They're as, you've done everything you can to enhance that. So their risk is less, your risk is less. And then 1% of your customers do not. And one client in that 1% gets breached or hacked. What do? You've got to stop what you're doing for all of your other clients, and you've got to go rescue that client. And because they didn't take your enhanced cybersecurity package, you're not doing anything to meet their compliance needs according to their cyber liability insurance policy. So how are they going to pay for the remediation? Because it's not going to be cheap, right? It'll be outside of the budget that they forecasted. Obviously, if there's a breach, and depending on how big the breach is, right, it could be disastrous. And so how do they pay for your services? Because good luck filing a claim against their policy and getting it approved and paid out, because we're seeing that too now. A lot of claims being denied because the carrier will come back, the insurance underwriter will come back and say, well, you weren't following our minimum requirements. You weren't changing passwords every 90 days. You weren't using two-factor authentication. You weren't backing up your data this way, and you weren't doing all these things. Is that fair? It's not, right? So if that company puts you at more risk than you're comfortable with, that's another, checkbox in the wrong box.
And it's a great segue to one of the other stories that I know you wanted to talk about, which was a column that the great Josh Liverman, who has also been a guest on the show many times in the past. He's from Net Sciences. He wrote a column called "The Impossible Dream of Cybersecurity," and honestly, he's talking about that exact same thing you're talking about. And here he's talking about that as he's gone on, he doesn't work with any client that doesn't subscribe to all of what they I'm trying to think of how he put it. He doesn't work with clients that don't share his collaborative vision of cybersecurity, basically. Yep. Like if they don't take cybersecurity as seriously as he does, he won't work with them at all, and he will shed them or just not bring them on at all. And we'll link to this column here, but he talks about a couple important points in here that, like, as he started off, he was self-employed, and then he became a managed service provider in 2010. And he said along the way, he's just that businesses that you cross paths with won't become your client because they don't take cybersecurity as seriously as you do. And maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, you could have a little bit of flexibility in terms of what the vision was of cybersecurity, and you could have a little bit of an air gap between those things. But these days in particular, it is critically important that you have clients that take cybersecurity seriously, because it doesn't only necessarily impact them. It, as you said, it impacts you, and it could potentially impact all of your other customers entirely. So I know you read this column, Eric. Any highlights that you wanted to talk about from it, or any points that he makes that you think are valid?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in violent agreement with Josh's perspective on this. In fact, I've been doing webinars and training on this for a while now, and my position is the same. If your client does not subscribe to at least your minimum enhanced cybersecurity portfolio, then the risk is too great for them, for you, and for all your other clients, just like I just described. So they cannot be your client. And in fact, I have 10 tips on how to have the cybersecurity conversation with clients and prospects. And one of them is basically, there is no good objection. There's no valid objection for not enhancing cybersecurity. And your client's failure to subscribe should not create an emergency on your part, right? In the previous scenario that I shared. So I recommend, yes, drawing a line in the sand and informing every single one of your clients that by this date, if you want to continue our business relationship, you must subscribe to one of my packages, whatever that is, whatever your recommended package is for that client. And, this is tougher than just going through the conversation we just had about just kind of getting rid of C customers, because you could have what you consider a B client or maybe an A client, right, that simply refuses. And that's a tough call. Matt, that is a tough call. Now, one of the criteria, remember, that I mentioned for being an A or a B client is that they take your direction and they move forward. So, I'd be surprised. I'm just saying it's possible, but then you probably adjust your perspective on what category they're in when they say no, right? So yeah, you have to protect yourself and your organization. One of the tips I mentioned, and I think there's a free white paper on my website under the free tools section where partners can download this. One of the things I say is that not only is the risk too great, but when you're having the conversation with your clients, you're not selling cybersecurity, right? So remove the word sell. This isn't a sales pitch. What you're doing is you're having a conversation with your client that says, look, we're all in this together, right? What I do affects what you do, and what I fail to do affects what you do, and what you do or fail to do affects what I do and all of my other clients. So let's come together and enhance your cybersecurity so that we can all sleep better at night, knowing that we're doing everything we can do to shield you from attacks, right? And have that discussion with them and let them know that there are no good objections. And the typical objections that we're going to hear, Matt, are things like, well, Eric, I thought you were already doing this for us, right? Why do you want us to sign up for this, other package? Well, what you mentioned, Matt, yeah, maybe 10 years ago, what we were doing was enough, because guess what? Maybe it was based upon the risk and the environment at that time. But what got us here won't get us there. Like these cyber criminals, I mean, we all know, right? Folks that tune into this program, we all know that these folks are criminal masterminds. They're smarter than a lot of the staff we have on staff at our organizations, right? They're figuring out ways to penetrate and doing, supply chain, attacks and things like that. They're infiltrating our platforms that we use to serve customers, and we are targets ourselves as channel pros and MSPs, right? So we have to adjust. I was listening to a cybersecurity expert talking about, he made a great analogy, Matt, about, remember when cars didn't have safety belts? right? Remember when we were kids, Matt, we'd ride in grandma or grandpa's car. There was no safety belt, right? There's no third brake light. There's no anti-lock brakes. There was no airbags, right? So this is like saying to the car manufacturers, hey, why do you want us to pay more for cars with all this stuff, right? Why wasn't the old stuff good enough? Times have changed, baby. Times have changed. You need airbags. You need ABS. You need third brake lights. You need this stuff. So this is the conversation that has to be had with these clients. So Erick, I thought you were doing this already well. We need to change things up now, right? Because the risk is so great. The other objection we typically get is, oh, Erick, it's not in the budget. It's not in the budget. It's not in the budget. Well, let's take a look at what we're doing here, because we need to find some budget for this, because this could be the single most impactful event that could potentially harm your business when there is a breach or an attack. And when I say, in my philosophy, and I know Josh talks about he has his package and this is what he sells and that's it. And either you subscribe or you don't. In my philosophy, there's good, better, best, right? But your good package has to be that minimum requirement that every client has to subscribe to in order to be your client. And then the better package has more enhanced cybersecurity and the best has your highest level. And maybe that has some regulatory compliance stuff in there, right? So there's different things for different audiences, right? But we have to get
necessity versus luxury, right? You can go to any customer and say, a seatbelt is a necessity because if you get into a crash, you're going to die, right?
Yeah.
The odds are you're going to die, but you don't necessarily need a cabin air filter to protect your lungs from pollen spores, but you can get that if you want. But that's a luxury, not a necessity.
Right. Well, and it's also based on risk profile, right? So if you are a Formula One race car driver, right, the safety equipment in that Formula One car is far beyond what we find in our normal, Ford Explorer today, right? So if you have clients
that you don't have a roll cage in your car, Erick?
Right. Like, if you get in a car, like, it doesn't break apart and maintain the integrity of the driver, right? And things like that, right? And have the telemetrics and all that. We're monitoring everything remotely from air pressure to, fuel pressure to oil, all that stuff, right? So, it's all about just having that conversation and then drawing a line in the sand. And I love how Josh just clearly shares how he does this with clients and why in his article. It's very direct and it makes an impact. And again, the risk is too great for all of us, right? To not start enforcing this with clients. I mean, I hate to hear about the partners that are being dragged into court over breaches by their customers that didn't take action. And, it's never the client that says, Erick, I'm suing you, I'm taking you to court. It's always, hey, Erick, I know you've been our provider for 10 years. We love you. It's not us. It's our attorneys. It's our insurance carrier, that would like you to meet us on the courthouse steps Tuesday at 9 a.m. Right? So it's real. And I don't think that we're ever going back to selling services and supporting services like we used to. And in fact, I think that moving forward, every conversation and every value proposition that we have with new clients and existing clients is going to revolve around cybersecurity.
And it goes back to another thing. You can always blame the lawyers. And most people are like, yeah, yep, blame the lawyers, get it. Yeah, fascinating discussion. And it's something that like not everybody thinks about, and they really need to. And I will say, it's not even a luxury to go and read this column or to read this blog post. It is a necessity if you are running an MSP today, because you absolutely have to start thinking about this stuff. And if you're not taking, if you're not holding your customers' feet to the fire in terms of cybersecurity, you need to go read this. If you're not holding if you're not evaluating your customers on a yearly basis, you absolutely have to go read this, because sometimes a little shedding a little weight here or there is going to really pay off in the long run, as we've been talking about. So go and check those out. Erick, I got a couple other stories that I wanted to get to today. And one of them I want to touch on is called, which I thought was just a really neat article that hit the site. And I believe this one was in I believe this one might have been in our October issue. But let me pull it up here. But it was a really fascinating article here, and it was called "Gaming PCs as Rendering Engines," and it's the basic gist. This was written by our own kind of James Gaskin, who writes a lot of the reviews and writes some of the tech content for the ChannelPro SME magazine. But it basically talks about how there is a need for power, right? And that gaming PCs are kind of developed to develop to provide the kind of power to provide video and audio compute power. And Intel's got this kind of continual compute initiative, which apparently lets PCs share an external GPU over a network. So in other words, kind of leveraging other computers' resources as edge resources to power your own thing. And they did an example event in May where they did this demo where there's like a standard laptop that was playing a game. And of course, had the kind of expected results of low video quality, low definition, jerky movements or whatever. And then they engaged this new kind of software solution that allowed the laptop to hook into a gaming PC that was across the stage. And as soon as they did that, it was like 4K graphics, smooth performance. And we're seeing not gaming as an example, but there's this whole new need for additional power around things like the metaverse and AI, and that there's this need for these continual compute resources on local networks. And what's interesting is where the article is kind of going, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes for this episode. So go and read it there so you can kind of get the gist of what they're doing. But what it's basically saying is that things like GPU resources is not cheap, right? And you can rent some of those in the cloud, but that's also not cheap. But you might have resources sitting on a local network, right? Either a gaming PC in this case, or anything that's got a big workstation that has a lot of GPU resources that may be sitting idle a good chunk of the time or not utilized to its capacity. So why not allow other nodes within your local network access that power in real time and power these interesting powerful workloads like AI, metaverse, so on and so forth. So it's a really fascinating read. And Erick, I wanted to kind of get your take. Do you see that this is kind of a necessary thing as we go forward, or do you think one, the cloud will ultimately power this, or do you think ultimately we'll just see more high power compute processing built into the local device to manage that need?
Yeah, it's an interesting premise, and I think that there's great opportunity for a couple of scenarios, right? I think that there's a business case to be had for leveraging local resources, right? So an example I could think of is, a typical user at their workstation needs to every once in a while use an application, call it an Adobe application, Premiere or something like that, where it takes a little more processing power, right? A little more compute, but not often enough to justify buying them, a very high performance PC. So I think in those situations, if there are one or two of those in the environment, that they could, leverage that local but not direct compute to enable them to complete the tasks that they need to do, I think that's great. I think, thinking about this, kind of expanding, sure, why not, think about a potential future where there are farms, right? GPU farms, we think crypto farms, we think server farms. I mean, why not GPU farms where vendors can sell access to compute, right, by the drink, and make it even more cost effective? Let's say that there are no high powered local devices in an environment, and every once in a while we need something like that, maybe multiple users, or maybe that's a bridge towards getting them to, not have a capital expense, right? But then have that being a tax advantage, right? Because it's simply they're paying for the service as part of their operational costs, and using that as they need. So I think that there's, I think great opportunity here. I'd like to, understand what the actual, case study is from from the provider of this technology and just see how they kind of foresee their users using it. I mean, I just think of those, as we're talking here, just kind of briefly reading the article and having the conversation. But I think anything that keeps businesses more efficient and cost effective and providing them the ability to operate without making huge capital investments, especially now with supply chain issues and things like that, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. I can definitely see a business case for moving towards a model where local resources become more available on a network for use for other machines. I don't see this across network unless you own those, because they have things like power consumption that you have to think about. So like I wouldn't necessarily want to share my CPU resources with my neighbor, for example, or the office next door, if that makes sense. But I think about it from a consumer standpoint, that actually has some really interesting use cases. One that I was just thinking about now is like, well, one, I'm sitting here at a computer, right? Let's say somewhere in my house or in my office, I've got 2 or 3 other machines that might be up and running, but they're a very low utilization. Why not? If I'm doing something more compute intensive in Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever it is, why can't I leverage those resources over the network if I can kind of join their resources together that way? Another interesting one, and I cannot believe Microsoft doesn't do this, but like Microsoft, for example, they have these like this giant Xbox Series X thing that they sell, which is a big home gaming console. It's got a giant, powerful GPU in it. Well, why not let other Windows computers in a local network subscribe to games, Game Pass or whatever on their computers and actually run the game using GPU resources from the Series X if it's available. And those kinds of scenarios I think are really, really interesting, where you might have this kind of expensive thing that can do this powerful thing, but it doesn't do it all the time, or you don't have everyone doing it at once. So why not make those resources a little bit more available, so you don't have to build those into all of these things? Really cool topic, really interesting cases. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because we're already surprisingly in a show with no news. We're running a little bit long, which is great. But there's one other review that I wanted to get to that we've been kind of sitting on for a while for this particular episode. But it's an interesting thing. If you're listening, you're watching, I want you to go send us an email, podcast@channelpro.com, or if you're on YouTube, go to the comments area. What do you think about this kind of whole network, local resource sharing example that they kind of give in this article, and let us know, like, what are your thoughts on the use cases? What do you think you could leverage with it? What do you think you could do with it? Does it make sense? Does it seem like a direction that we're going to be going more and more in the future? So give us your thoughts, and we will read some of those comments on air down the road. The next story that I wanted to bring up is a review that I did for the October issue. And we're going to talk about another review that also recently hit similar thing, but I reviewed the Dynabook Portage X40K, speaking of hardware. And I always love talking about hardware. So I got a chance this is the first Dynabook that I've had my chance to actually get a hold of in person and review. And Eric, did you know who Dynabook was before you read this?
I did not.
Right, like I didn't necessarily know either, and I was a big Toshiba computer fan. I've used Toshiba PCs going back. I mentioned it here in my original draft of this. I kind of broadened it out a little bit more, but I've got a Toshiba Satellite Pro CS. I might have brought it on the show before. I can't remember as a museum pick when we were doing those. But it is mid 90s Windows for Workgroups 3.11. We're back into the almost NT era. That you're discussing there earlier in the show, but it's not a svelte notebook by any means, but it was one that really stuck with me as a product that was well built, still works today. I can still go and I still turn it on. It wasn't, it doesn't compare to anything that's built today, but at the time it was a very powerful notebook. And I mentioned another Toshiba one that I've used for a long time, the Protege Z930. Ultrabook, which even like to this day is still one of the thinnest, lightest notebooks I've ever owned, and also still works. I have to say the battery doesn't last quite as long as it used to, but it still turns on and it's still moderately functional as a computer. So Toshiba has a storied history with me personally. Have you ever used a lot of Toshiba notebooks in the past?
Yeah, I've used satellites in the past as well, and good workhorse machines. They're pretty much tanks, the ones that I used in the past. So like you say, battery life wasn't the greatest, in those days, but no other notebook had better battery life. They were all kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah, they were. So Toshiba, the name of Toshiba is gone in terms of computing computers, and I knew that. I haven't seen them in a while. I knew they got bought, sold, what's happening in all the industry. But Toshiba, the client solutions, that while it got it's a subsidiary of Sharp. It was bought by somebody and then sold partly owned by Fox. It's like, it's a big mess, but they still make computers. They just make them under a different name called Dynabook. A little bit different animal than what it used to be, but they still have a lot of the same names. So I got excited to get my hands on one of these Dynabook notebooks and just kind of see what they're all about these days. Do they still kind of stand true to what they used to be? They still support the Toshiba products that have been sold forever. I was actually able to look up the manual for my Satellite Pro 400 CS. So it still very much is this group that has all this, but they are a little different. So I'm not going to run the whole review. I'll put the link to the review in the show notes page for this episode. So if you're listening on your phone, open up the description area. Usually you'll see all the links in there. You can go look at these. And if you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, hit all of those things, and then open up the description area there, and you'll see the links to these as well. So you can kind of follow along with all the details. But what they sent me was a 14-inch notebook, considered a premium business computer. It's a 12th gen Core i5, 1240p. The one they sent me was the little bit better version. Comes in two different configs. They sent me the i7 1260p, had 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gig SSD as well. These have a very unique style. I think Dynabook is trying to make something that stands out, looks unique in the marketplace, because honestly, like the world of phones, all phones look the same. They're hunks of screen in a plastic case, right? A lot of notebooks, silver, black, thin. You don't get a whole lot of variety in notebooks until you get into the gaming class or some of the crazier class workstation style powerful notebooks from Alienware, Asus, HP Omen, those kinds of things. So they make this like blue. They're all blue. I can't recall if they make any other colors, but all the ones that I was kind of looking at, they're all this kind of blue color, a blue metallic lid, a blue body, but they are very durable. So I kind of picked up on that these are mil-spec tested, mil-spec rated, and they're I was actually very pleasantly surprised by the durability of this particular one. I'd easily put it in the category of like a Lenovo ThinkBook, which is also a pretty durable, but not maybe ThinkPad class notebook, but very durable, very attractive if you like blue. Eric, you've seen some pictures of it. Blue is not personally my cup of tea, but what do you think?
I think it's shooting for another demographic, right? I think the target audience might be a little bit, maybe a little bit younger than you and me. I don't know, Matt. I think everybody wants to personalize and their thing. I mean, look at Apple, done a great job of creating a palette of colors for all their stuff every once in a while, right? To try to appeal to different buyers. But yeah, for a ChannelPro blue, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be attracted to blue in particular. Silver, black. Keep it simple for me.
Yeah, I do like the whole keep it simple thing. Some customers might really like it. I thought the lid was nice. I liked the blue on the lid. I thought that the case was a little toyish looking because it's a different material. But it wasn't bad. But again, like at the end of the day, if you're judging a notebook by its color, I don't know. And like Apple sometimes has different colors for stuff. Ultimately, like they have gray and white or gray and gray. They have a pretty limited selection these days too. So It's like they pick their horse and they write on it. Dynabook has picked their horse and they write on it. I love the amount of ports that it had. It had a whole bunch of different ports, a couple of USB-Cs. It had built-in Ethernet networking. It had Bluetooth, had Wi-Fi. It had a couple USB 4 ports, USB 3.1 port, full-size HDMI, micro SD, another USB on the other side. Very well port. I like, Eric, I like ports.
Chock full of ports. Yeah, that was something I was surprised too with the micro SD card reader too. That was a plus. And, audio out, right? Because a lot of notebooks are getting rid of that port too. So it's very versatile that way for sure. Yeah,
it's not uncommon to see, especially when we're talking about other brands. It's like, well, we have a USB-C port and that's it. It's like, well, if you want to do anything other than that, you got to break out dongles. And this one, I don't. It has Thunderbolt. You can add dongles and stuff to it to break out functionality, but it really does have pretty much everything you would need. It also has a barrel power connector, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it comes with a USB-C charger, so like, why does this have a barrel power connector? I'm like, and don't get me wrong, I like I like the fact that so many vendors are kind of standardizing on USB-C for power. Like that's nice. Lets the adapters be a little bit more interchangeable, a little bit more universal. But if you're going to put a proprietary connector on it, you may as well ship it with that one to free up another port. You know what I mean?
And you think it adds cost, and it probably adds to maybe the thickness of the laptop with that barrel connector? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But that was the decision that they made. I thought it was kind of weird. I mentioned that in the review. I mentioned, well, I'm going to stop on the build quality there for a second because I want to reference real quick another Dynabook review we did. I know we kind of did two in a pretty short period of time, but James Gaskin got his hands on one of their newer Dynabooks that's kind of built for the education market. It's an 11.6 inch, runs Windows 11 Education Edition, and he hit on a lot of the same points. Nice and durable, very well built, decent keyboard. Still had the same color palette. I think for a student, student's just going to accept what they accept. But he hit on a lot of the same notes in terms of the build that I did. And I'll reference both reviews in the show notes if you want to go and read some of these. I won't go too far else into the review. I'll let you go and read it. The notebook certainly has some high points and low points. A couple of low points. The display was kind of a low point for me. I didn't think it was a very good one. The webcam was also kind of a low point. It didn't perform quite as well as I would expect. I would expect that these days, especially with remote work, even if remote work is not quite as important as it was last year or the year prior, remote work isn't going away. If you're deploying notebooks out into the market, video conferencing is more important than it has ever been for business, and you cannot skimp on webcams in business computers anymore. You just can't. So you have to. You got to do that. The touchpad was good. The keyboard, I really like the keyboard. In fact, I like the keyboard better on this one than I do my ThinkBook. It had a nice key travel, very, very good. Only a couple of the keys were a little squishy. Performance was really good. No problems day to day, in and out. The battery life was also pretty good. And it's like I can't necessarily attribute all performance to Dynabook. Ultimately, all of these computers are running the same Intel, stuff that, they pick their platform, but for the one that they sent me, the i7-1260 certainly performed well in range, if not a little bit better than most other laptops in that range. Battery life was, like I said, it was pretty good. And I've got some final thoughts there that I'll let you go and read. But, Eric, you kind of read through the review. Have you had a chance to see a Dynabook in person anywhere?
I haven't, but you did a good job on the write-up there. I do agree with you. I was kind of surprised notebook this day and age only being like 720p. That seemed to be, an opportunity there for improvement. And screen quality where, these laptops now are becoming such an integral part of everybody's everyday life. I mean, we're even streaming movies and we're traveling and looking at things. So kind of the screen quality thoughts that you had there, I thought were a missed opportunity as well. I mean, but the plus side, I mean, it's got all the ports. I mean, I don't need to carry extra dongles, keyboard being good, strong battery life, really, really strong. So it was kind of disappointing to just, see those couple of misses where you would think, man, that's an easy win there. Why would they, not put a better camera in and do something about the screen?
Yeah, and I didn't judge the camera solely on it being 720p. It just wasn't a very good 720p camera. It didn't perform in the light very well. It's kind of noisy. Like I've seen good 720p webcams, and I think it's still a little low for modern day use. I would put a 1080p camera in most, but if you're going to put a 720p one, it better be a decent one. And the display, I only had a couple pages to fit in the magazine, so I kind of have to choose what I talk about. The display wasn't horrible. But it wasn't great. And this is a semi-business premium notebook. It didn't demand the price.
You've got an i7 Intel processor in the thing, right? So you think that denotes a higher quality. If they really want to compete at the business class, you got to look at, apples and apples, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I think, a little bit better display, round out a couple of the shortcomings. And I didn't walk away unhappy with this device. So for anybody at Dynabook listening, or for anybody who reads the review, I really try not to come off as a negative Nancy. I liked it. It was really nice. I think there were some decisions that were made that were weird. The giant rubber foot on the bottom, I wasn't following. It turned it from a svelte notebook into one that sat really tall on a table. Like, I'm like, why? That was a really weird design decision. So just some stuff like that. I think a little bit better display, a little bit better webcam. The color thing, I don't know, like not for me. Maybe offer blue and some a more standard color that might be a little bit more universally appealing. Because if you're a channel reseller and you're trying to push this out through partners, you don't want to get resistance from customers based on something like a color. So if you get a couple options, great. Make the configurability good and have a good partner program. I do want to point out though, and then one thing that I didn't give it enough credit for in the review because I just ran out of space. All of these, the one that they sent, I believe all of them come with a 3-year warranty, which is
great warranty.
Really impressive for a standard warranty from an OEM PC maker these days. So really good stuff. Go and read the review. Get your hands on a Dynabook in person. Check it out. You might walk away more impressed, less impressed. Let us know what you think of them. And go check that out. And go check out the review on the education one as well. Because if you're selling an education, sometimes having something different or variety might be good. And with the standard warranty on these, not bad. Kids use laptops as baseball bats, when they're in school. So with that, we're going to take a short break and resume on the other side. Everybody stay tuned. We will be right back. And welcome back to ChannelPro Weekly. Wow, what an awesome and fascinating discussion that Erick and I have had. Erick, so with me here on the other side, our guest co-host, the man who's filling in for Rich's big shoes, even though Rich has kind of small feet, so I don't really know how that works in the long run. But Erick, Erick, awesome discussion. I know we didn't have necessarily a guest, another guest interview on or whatever, but we've hit on a lot of great topics, and I found it fascinating. And wow, did the time fly? Yeah,
it was fun. It was fun. Catching up, reminiscing a little bit, and then, covering some of these stories. So, no, it's a great program. And I think that folks that haven't discovered it yet are really missing out. You and Rich do a great job, and you have, great folks to come on to add flavor and perspective. And, that's what it's all about, growing the community, growing perspective, giving folks guidance, giving them reviews of, equipment, services, vendors. That's how we grow. So I appreciate the job you guys do.
And much appreciated as well. And thank you so much for coming on and joining that. We do have a little bit of fun planned, though. Like I said, this is a Halloween episode coming up near the Halloween holiday. And what is one thing that folks like to do around Halloween other than dress up in crazy costumes and go with their kids combing the neighborhood for candy? And some even do that into their adulthood without combing the neighborhood, or without their kids combing the neighborhood for free candy, because who doesn't like a free candy? Now, we could have gone a couple ways. I could have said, Erick, let's get your top list of Halloween candies, which I think would have been easy. But the problem is I think there's a few candies that have become mainstays over the year that, unless you have kind of weird tastes, like nobody, if you're going to like put a piece of candy in each hand, right? If you're at a house, you said trick or treat, we're going to put a piece of candy in this hand, a piece of candy in this hand. And in this hand, there's like a little baggie of candy corn. And on this hand, there's a Reese's peanut butter cup. No one, except for the crazy people who don't like chocolate or peanut butter, or, people who are allergic to peanuts will be like, no, I don't like that one. But for the most part, like there are like 5 staple Halloween candies that tend to dominate. And then you have people who like the sugar-based ones versus the chocolate ones. But even then, I think the chocolate ones kind of dominate. So rather than go the easy path where I think we're just going to come on the other end with like, yes, Reese's peanut butter cups are delicious, or Three Musketeers or Snickers or whatever.
Well, wait a minute, Matt. Wait a minute. I'm going to slow your roll a little bit there, because now I can't leave it alone. So now I want to know, what is your absolute favorite Halloween candy? The top one. Which is it?
Oh, well, see, but that's the thing. I'm so typical in that regard, because I am a absolute glutton for peanut butter. I love peanut butter. And I am a huge Reese's peanut butter cup fan. And I can take Reese's in any of the various forms that it comes in, via Reese's peanut butter cups themselves, which are just heaven on earth, Reese's Fast Break, whatever. And then if I got to go from there, I'm still in the realm of peanut butter. Like, okay, no Reese's, give me a Butterfinger, man. I'm there. I'm there. So like, it's just not, So
no, this is good conversation, because I too love a good Reese's peanut butter cup. And of all the Reese's candies. It's the peanut butter cup that gets me, but it's messy. It's messy, messy, messy. And my goodness, you know, if it's gotten hot or something, then it gets melted into a weird shape, and then you're just, it's messy. So I'm going to tell you mine, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not messy. It's delicious. And those are the two best reasons. And I'm just a Snickers fan. I love a little fun-sized Snicker. Perfect. I like a Payday. You know, I like a Butterfinger. So, you know, just saying, I like those. But the Reese's, I do love Reese's. It's just how much mess do I want to deal with? If they somehow were able to formulate it so you could just unwrap, like, why do they put it in the paper? You know, maybe that's how they make them. I get it. But if it was just wrapped, that you just pop it in your mouth without messing with that brown paper, that would be my favorite candy for sure.
There definitely is a mess factor to Reese's peanut butter cups. So I guess just don't eat them in the heat. I hear you. I do love a good Snickers though. I mean, Snickers is classic.
Yeah.
You know, I love Butterfinger. I love, I used to love toffee. I mean, I like Score. Whatchamacallits are really good. Twix.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really go down the chocolate candy route and find a bad one. But what I wanted to talk about, which I think is going to be really interesting, we're going to have a lot of varied opinions. And before we move to that, I'll say, folks, what is your favorite Halloween candy? Post in the comments. Send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Best Halloween candy, go. Just go do it in the comments, and we'll go and review those later. But what I want to talk about, where I think will be different, is best Halloween movies, right? This is the time of year you're going to dive in and watch some of those awesome classic Halloween movies, some new, some old. There's a million of them. And the definition of a Halloween movie, I think, can be a little flexible. You know, there are some movies, like, it doesn't have to be like horror thrasher films to qualify as a Halloween movie. But there are definitely movies that kind of fit in during the Halloween holiday. So I thought we'd maybe just go back and forth and kind of give like a top five, starting with number 5. Eric, go.
Well, I don't know if I didn't categorize them like top, like 5, 1, this or that, but I'll give you one. Now, some people may disagree it's a Halloween movie, but I'm thinking, you know, anything that's kind of scary, but I like a sci-fi twist to it myself, right? I love John Carpenter's The Thing. I love that movie. That movie is awesome. It is great. I love it. Stars Kurt Russell and, you know, other fabulous casts of characters. They did a remake of it recently, which is kind of the prequel to that, which was really good too. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, I think, is Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in that one. But I love John Carpenter's The Thing. It is just, man, it is scary.
Awesome. Yeah, great pick. Love The Thing. I didn't necessarily rank mine either. I guess I probably shouldn't have said number 5 to number 1, because even I didn't bother doing that. But I will reach back in time and I kind of give a kind of what I would consider a B movie. But I remember from my youth, I read the book when I was a kid, and I liked the movie. I've seen the movie more recently with my kids, and it does not necessarily hold up quite as well as my young man brain remembers, but it's still a cute story. They recently redid it. I haven't seen the remake. I'm not a big fan of remakes, whatever, but it's a movie called The Witches. Basically, it's about a boy who kind of turns into a mouse, and there's this whole band of witches and stuff. And there's a big adventure around that.
Family-friendly Halloween movie. Yeah, family-friendly.
Good Halloween movie, good fun story. One that you can watch with your kids if you got kids, and it does not hold up as well today, but it's still fun. It's still a fun story and a fun movie, so I recommend that. The Witches is my one. Eric, number 2.
Well, you said The Witches. I'm going to go with The Witch. Now, if you haven't seen The Witch, it's probably the scariest movie I've seen in a long time, and it's set back in the late 1800s. You know, there's no electricity, running water, a family out in the middle of nowhere. They've been excommunicated by their church. And the actress from The Queen's Gambit, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she plays, I think it's probably one of her first parts, maybe, because she's very young. But if you guys are in to be just like scared out of your mind, and I'm telling you, when you watch it at night with the lights off, it is scary. The Witch.
I have not seen it. I did like the actress from The Queen's Gambit, so that one I think I am definitely going to go check out
Mm.
for Halloween. I'm going to give you another one of mine. A movie that I also it's a little bit older from the 90s if I remember correctly. A movie that introduced me to two things. One, I was never a big Tales from the Crypt fan. But they did a movie in the 90s called Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. And for some reason, somehow I happened to watch this one with a friend or whatever. And it was just a wacky, bizarre story about there were like demons as warriors and the key that like the blood of Christ in it, and they could build like shields or whatever,
Yeah.
and to protect themselves that would protect themselves from the demons. It was just wacky. It was original. It was crazy. Really, really fun story. Still holds up. I watched it probably maybe 5 years ago. It's one that is on my list to pull out again this season. So if you haven't checked this one out, do that. This is also the movie that introduced me to the band Filter, because the song "Hey Man, Nice Shot" appeared in this movie, and that set me down a path of alternative music based on the Filter style, which I thought was really good. Have you ever seen Demon Knight?
I have not.
Definitely one I would recommend. Really fun. I don't think there's anything in it. I wouldn't let young kids watch this one. But if your kids are anywhere between, I would say maybe 10 and up, it shouldn't be anything all that horrible, and they should be able to watch it. Your next pick.
So mine, no kids can watch any of mine. Okay, so just putting it out there. So in that vein, I like, remind me of an old, like an 80s movie, and it was called Creep Show. And it was an anthology of like 4 or 5 different stories, kind of very, very kind of tongue-in-cheek, but scary horror. Kind of like if you ever, there was a comic book or whatever called Creep Show, and that's where kind of the movie took its kind of look and feel from it. Like starts off with like comic book pages, and then the story happens. It's very, very fun. Little scary, but not nowhere as scary as The Witch, but it's kind of fun, tongue-in-cheek horror.
Oh, awesome. I have seen that, and it is great suggestion. A little obscure too, which I love as well. All right, I'm gonna go for classic though. It's Halloween, so you know what, I'm gonna say the movie Halloween, because the original Halloween is probably, in my opinion, now there are some who would argue this, because there's a couple of those classic Halloween kind of things like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever. I'm sorry, Halloween is probably the best of that genre kind of thrasher film. And the original one with Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance is just a phenomenal. I probably don't have to tell you about it. You probably know about it. Put it on your Halloween watch list, because I know there's one that recently came out. Don't bother. Honestly, don't bother.
Yeah.
The original Halloween is the original 1978. That's the one you want to watch. Just a great movie. Will always be a great movie till the end of time.
Yep, that was going to be one of my picks too. So good picks, and I got to pick a different one. So for my next one, I'm going to go with, and again going with the scary / sci-fi. I'm going to go with the very first Alien. That movie kind of changed what science fiction and sci-fi horror and all that. I mean, it changed the landscape there. So Alien, the first Alien, again, kind of. I think those came out, that and The Thing might have come out right around the same time. So it was kind of a crazy kind of time there. But I love the first Alien movie. And, the follow-up to it, Aliens, was good too, but all the rest I could do without. But that first one is really, really scary. We've never seen anything like that before that came out. Ridley Scott directing it, brilliant acting, Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt. I mean, a whole cast of great characters, and really kept the alien, hidden for much of the movie, which added to the suspense. So I love Alien.
Alien's good. I have to admit though, I liked Aliens better than Alien. I know. Everybody's telling me now, but I did.
I actually have the Nostromo back here. If you see the very back there, that's the Nostromo from Alien.
That is awesome. Yeah, very, very cool. All right, so I got to come up with 2 more.
2 more? Okay.
Yeah. I'll come up with 2 more. I think maybe, was that your 4th or 3rd pick? I think
that
was your 4th.
My 4th.
So I got to come up with. I have to come up with 2 more. So, unless you have another one you'd really want to recommend, because I kind of stole one of yours. So
I like A Quiet Place. if you've seen that.
I have never seen A Quiet Place. No.
A Quiet Place? Oh, yeah. This is another kind of sci-fi scary movie. And this is the actor John Krasinski plays Jim from The Office, right? So it was kind of hard to see him in a real serious role because you know Jim from The Office. And Emily Blunt plays his wife in this, and they have a couple of kids. And there's an alien invasion that happens. You know, in the backstory of the movie, it kind of takes place like this has already happened and this is how people live now. And the aliens key off of sound. So everyone has to be completely quiet. And you see them, how they live with they got 2 little kids and they're very quiet because any sound can attract these aliens that just rip people apart like in shreds. And it's amazing for its lack of sound. Like there's not much dialogue and it's all visual. And then when there is a sound and when these things attack, I mean, just the sound, and it's all in Dolby Atmos and everything. So you really like, it adds to the realism and the scare factor of it. But A Quiet Place is a good one.
Very interesting pick. Very interesting pick. I haven't seen that. It sounds almost reminiscent of Bird Box a little bit. But
it's very simple. But yeah, Quiet Place and then Bird Box came along afterwards. I love Bird Box too. But you got to check out A Quiet Place, Matt.
Yeah, I will. I will check that out. I love it when directors go a little crazy with sound. Like I remember 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is not one of my Halloween picks, but there's like no music. It was so brave to just have nothing in terms of audio. Sometimes it was really, really cool. I did come up with 2 that I want to talk about. One is because probably the most disturbing movie I've ever seen, and disturbing is usually good right around Halloween time. Is a movie called Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman.
Oh, yeah.
That one, it's not traditionally considered a Halloween movie, but it's probably the most, like I said, disturbing movie I've ever seen. Follows like 2 kind of detectives who are investigating crimes that are based on the 7 deadly sins. And there are some visuals in that still stick with me to this day. Not one I would recommend to watch with the kids, by the way. Not a good one, but definitely if you are over the age of 18 and you can handle some very disturbing imagery, that is one to do. And since I did come up with the second one, I'll end it with this one, Eric, and let's see what your thoughts on this one. There is no better movie, arguably, to watch during the Halloween timeframe than a fun movie that the whole family can watch, but is really fun, has a couple of scares in it, it's funny, it's classic, it's just awesome, and that is Ghostbusters, the original, not 2. Afterlife was good. I didn't really care for the remake. The original Ghostbusters with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd. What was the other guy? Oh, I know.
Harold Ramis.
Harold Ramis, of course.
Super wacky, super fun, very hilarious. Yeah, those guys just were in their prime of comedic talent at that time. Very, very fun movie.
And even though the effects are old, I mean, it still holds up.
It holds up. Like The Thing. Like people would say, "Oh, The Thing," But you know what? The effects hold up. It's like part stop motion and stuff. Very creative stuff. But I get it. I mean, Ghostbusters classic for sure. And everybody knows the theme song.
Right. That is absolutely true. Not any stretches into the B movie territory with that one, but it is an awesome movie, well worth going back and watching, and many, many times over because it's such fun. And again, it's one, there's like one spot where when my kids were younger, I would kind of have them kind of shield their eyes a little bit. But other than that, it's perfectly safe for kids of most ages if they can handle that kind of stuff. But your kids better than I do. So just make smart decisions. But super fun. Go back, put those on your list. I think that's an awesome list of movies to watch. And of course, I would love to hear from our viewing and listening audience what your favorite Halloween movies are. Not Halloween the series, but just movies to watch around the Halloween holiday. Did we get some of these right? Did we get some of these wrong? What do you think? What would be your recommendations, your top 5 or so that you would recommend for folks to watch? Put them in the comment section on YouTube. Send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Let us know if you want to hear it. Well, we're going to say goodbye in just a second, Eric, but I want to kind of preview what's going to happen in the week ahead. Folks, what is going on in the week ahead here is next week, we will not have an episode of Channel Pro Weekly. And why is that? Because next week, we will be in Los Angeles doing our last Channel Pro SMB Forum event of the year. It is going to be a gangbusters blowout event. Make sure that you put it on your calendar to go. There's not a lot of hotel space left if you're planning on staying overnight, but there might be a room here or there if you like the second you listen to this, assuming you're listening to this right as we put it out. There might be some hotel space, but otherwise, make it a plan to show up on event day. We'll make sure we can cram you into the room. It's going to be busy. It's going to be awesome. It's a great content package. We're going to learn about employee retention techniques, hiring. We're going to be talking about various managed services thing. I should probably get the list up. Erick, you're going to be there. You looked at the agenda. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. And you know what? Come up and talk to us about your favorite Halloween movies while we're there, because why not, right? This is a great time for us to get together, to really start working on the business rather than in the business, start planning for 2023 and your growth strategies. I mean, it's always chock full of great content. There's great strategic vendor partners there, and there's peers. Those hallway conversations, the conversations over lunch and breakfast. I mean, those are the things that sometimes add, even more value to the experience, that cherry on top when you can actually compare notes with peers. And what I love about the ChannelPro events is everybody that attends is very open and willing to share. And you know what? That's something that, again, I appreciate about our community, Matt. Been in it for the last 15, 20 years or whatever. And that is something that I really cherish and hasn't really changed. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there next week, as well as, all of our other listeners.
Yeah, I'm not even going to say anything more than that. You pitched it well more better than I could. November 2nd and November 3rd. November 2nd is a pre-day event. MSP Ignite is going to be doing a peer-to-peer session that all are welcome to attend. Dell will be there. The Dell Expert Network will be there doing their pre-day event that you want to go and check out. Cocktail party the night before, and a big day of content starting November 3rd, early in the morning. Join us for breakfast, stay all day. It will be absolutely worth your time. Learn more, events.channelpronetwork.com. You'll find links to register there. You can also go to channelproforum.com/LA. That'll take you right to the registration page. Go and register soon. There is still space available, I know. I don't know how much space will be available in the next 5 days. So go reserve your spot. Use promo code CPVIP. That will bypass any registration fees, so you can register without any reason. Anywhere in the Southern Los Angeles or Southern California area, make it a point to be there. Absolutely. Erick Simpson, the great Erick Simpson, the one and only Erick Simpson, our guest host doing the show with me today. Thank you so much for filling in with Rich and being a host with me. It was honestly a great show. You're right. I was nervous going into this. I'm always nervous when Rich isn't here because it's like, oh, there's so much pressure, but great conversation, great dialogue. I learned a lot. Hopefully our audience learned a lot too. For anybody who wants to connect with you, learn more about you, where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, browse over to ericksimpson.com. That's ERICK Simpson.com. And Matt, I had a great time. Looking forward to doing it again next time. So Rich, take more vacations, brother.
He'll take you up on that too, I'm sure. Big thanks for coming on. Like I said, no show next week, so we will be back the week after. We've got, I believe, Zach Kramer is gonna be our guest host today. Rich should be back. We should have lots of more news and stuff to talk about going into that, so make sure you make it a point to miss it. And with that, a big thanks to Erick Simpson, and we will see everybody in a couple of weeks. Take care.